You guys have been both feet involved in what is happening during the pandemic. As you start to think about what the post-pandemic world looks like, how different do you think what you do will be, and how different do you think the life sciences industry will look as a result of what we've all just lived through?
Well, Guy, first off, thanks very much for having me. Yes, COVID will absolutely have changed the life sciences industry, and for the better. We will work faster and more focused in deeper partnerships and make a bigger difference. I mean, I think COVID has been a rallying cry for the industry. We've all been focused on fighting this pandemic, and it's catalyzed a huge amount of energy and results. And I think one other angle I would say that I think is a positive change for the industry is we've seen healthcare, the inequities in the healthcare system. And that's a call to action for the industry. We've got to make sure we do inclusive research, make sure that the drugs that we're studying are studied in all populations, and we make sure that all patients have access to the innovations that we're producing.
Yeah, in the meantime, if I just take the flip side of that, Alexander, is that a lot of people put off medical care during the pandemic, and I'm wondering what you're expecting in terms of a surge in particular diagnoses for that, disorders that come out of that. How are you guys prepping over there?
It's a very good question, and we see it as a big issue. We're very much focused in oncology, and that's been very, very concerning. It's, I think, a surprise for many of us to see how much cancer diagnoses and initiations of treatment were impacted by the pandemic, and in fact, they're still not back to baseline, to pre-COVID levels. So we do expect patients to come back in, to get diagnosed and treated. The thing that really is a deep concern for all of us is, how many patients will be presenting later on in their cancer journey and potentially will have worse outcomes as a result. So I think this is a rallying cry for the industry, and we're joined with others right now, encouraging patients to get screened, to get diagnosed. It's so important in cancer to catch the disease as early as possible and treat.
Do you think the regulatory environment has changed as well? I think we know that the regulatory environment has changed. Regulators have moved relatively quickly to approve drugs. We've seen quick trials. We've seen, obviously, a lot more flexibility. How do you think the regulatory regime is going to look post-COVID? You're involved in Alzheimer's as well. We saw what happened earlier this year, a more flexible approach being taken to Biogen's therapy, a lot of controversy around that. What do you take away from what is happening on the regulatory front, and what did you think about your business and your approach to Alzheimer's as a result of what happened with Biogen?
Well, Guy, I think it is one of the areas that absolutely has changed as a result of the pandemic. I mean, the level of collaboration with the FDA has been really extraordinary. We've had 10 treatments we've been exploring for use against COVID. We now have 2 with emergency use authorizations, including the one you mentioned at the very start of the segment. And that dialogue with the FDA has been excellent. I think the ability to share data when it's available and having these rolling submissions has been enormously powerful. And also in terms of endpoints, and you were referring to Alzheimer's, I think the use of surrogate endpoints and then confirmatory data subsequently in terms of the hard outcomes, that offers so much possibility to bring treatments, meaningful treatments to patients sooner. So I think these are all things that are heading in a very, very positive direction coming out of COVID and in partnership with government and particularly the FDA.
So have you discussed asking for accelerated approval from the FDA?
We're in discussions with the FDA. What is very important to us is we have 2 phase 3 studies for our lead molecule in Alzheimer's, and we will produce cognition outcomes, which of course is what everybody wants to see. The patient and the healthcare system wants to see, does this have a result in terms of changing the rate of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's. So we want to make sure we sustain those studies and read those results out, and that's a priority for us.
One of the more negative aspects of the pandemic is that maybe it's becoming a little harder to recruit people for trials. What has your experience been there?
We have a very broad portfolio of drugs in lots of therapy areas. In fact, in some therapy areas, like our drug for COVID that you mentioned at the start, actually we had some of the fastest studies in our history. And this wasn't just about patient recruitment. We managed to actually design the studies, implement them, and all the way from the data closure when the studies closed to the filing, we broke records. So I think this actually shows the possibilities coming out of COVID. And we've done many other things. For example, we now have remote data capture, remote studies, where patients don't necessarily need to go into a hospital to receive the study drug, or to go into the hospital to get certain types of tests in terms of their outcomes or their side effects. They can do these things remotely. The possibilities, COVID has accelerated our openness and regulators' openness to using new approaches.